This is a strange time with lots of pressures and stress. I can't make it all disappear, of course, but I can offer you a way to stay hopeful, grounded, and focused for the new year. It's called Productivity Tools 2021. Simple strategies to help you be calm, mindful, relaxed, and productive. Themes include a working at home self-assessment, startup and shutdown routines, 3 ways to use fasting for clarity, a method to replace bad habits, spring clean up your life tips, and so much more. During December and January only, we are offering a 2-for-1 special. Get the 2021 Focus Toolkit and all the 2020 organizational tools with their how-to recordings. For only $19.99, you can have 2 toolkits for the price of 1. How-to recordings to get organized, and invitations to 12 months of upcoming focus tutorials and recordings. But don't wait too long to decide. After January 31st, the price will go up to $27.99 and will only include the 2021 toolkit. So don't miss out on this great deal. Get in on your 2-for-1 productivity tools special right away before the deadline. Go to shiftworkplace.co/productivity tools. That's shiftworkplace.co/productivity tools. Hello, Culture and Leadership Connections podcast listeners. Today, I'm very excited to present to you Christina Stathopoulos, who is a certified coach and who runs a business called Hear Her Roar, which I am a big fan of. And when she contacted me and said she would like to be on my podcast, I was just so honored. So let me tell you a little bit about Christina. In her business, Hear Her Roar, Christina specializes in working with millennial women who have taken on a new leadership role and are facing the common struggles of managing a team, having executive presence, leading people towards goals, letting go of doing all the to-do stuff. In addition to her private practice, she serves the next generation of coaches and leaders as a leader in training of accomplishment coaching's coach and leadership training program. In her 4 years of business, she has coached 1,500 plus hours and provided 850 plus hours of leadership training. She is an international speaker, having recently spoken at the world's largest coaching conference in Prague about coaching millennial leadership. In short, she loves this stuff. When she's not talking about coaching or leadership, you can find her brewing beer, sneaking plants into her office, eating delicious meals with her husband, crying over cute dogs on Instagram, or setting a few witchy intentions. So, Christina, that's an awesome bio. And I am just thrilled that you're on the podcast and that we can go through an interview together today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. And that was a beautiful introduction. I really appreciate it.
Well, I'm really happy to be featuring you today, Christina. So why don't you tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure thing. So the bio pretty much covered it, but if I could go on to say, again, my name is Christina Stathopoulos. I'm a few things. I'm a coach. I'm a wife. I'm a millennial woman. I am the daughter of Greek immigrants. I'm queer. And I love to share all those things because what I do as a coach fundamentally, specifically with the women that I work with, is that I support women in taking up space to fully express all of who they are and really amplify their voices so that the changes that they see to make or the contribution that they want to bring to the organizations that they work for or the businesses that they create have the maximum impact.
That was a very concise and articulate description of what you do. Thank you. So let's go into some of the groups that you were born into. Probably Greek would be one we could start with, but I'm sure that there were many others because we're all born into places and times and generations. So tell me about, from these groups that you were born into, what are some of the things that have most influenced your sense of culture and self as a leader right now?
Absolutely. Well, I think to your point, Greek, 110%. I mean, my dad immigrated here when he was a young boy. My mom is first generation Greek American. So I like to joke with people that I am 1.5 generation Greek American. And I could go on for hours alone about how Greek culture has shaped my leadership. But I think the most important and most meaningful way that it has shaped it is, to me, you cannot be Greek without having a core value of creating family. And while I'm not necessarily creating families in all of my leadership positions or having my clients go and do so, I think how that translates into leadership is it has me desire to connect with people and to not just relate to myself as, a position of authority or someone to tell people like what they should be doing or how to get it done, but to really feel that sense of partnership and relationship with them and to care about their own visions and goals as much as I care about my visions and goals. So there's definitely that family piece to it, even if we might not necessarily usually use the word family in a leadership setting.
Well, this feeling of family, I think, is significant because it's missing in most leadership situations. People seem to be some kind of an independent island in the middle of nowhere, and you can't do that without a group.
Mm-hmm.
And the first and most important group is the group of the family you grew up with. So I think that's an important point. Tell me a little bit about some incidents from your childhood.
Ooh, where would you like me to start?
Well, let's pick a couple that you think were really foundational for you, that really formed you or stand out for you.
Yeah, so I think a fun fact about me is that my first English word was hot dog. And the reason for that is my maternal grandfather, my papu as I call him because he's fortunately still with us, from the youngest age I can remember, he owned a hot dog truck. And when it was his turn to watch over me, how he did so was taking me in the truck with him. And I love those memories so much, because like how comical. I feel like we could have had our own TV show if someone had known about it and just stuck a camera. But
that's something you should probably still do.
But, not only is it a fun memory to recount, but I think why it was formative for me was two reasons. And first being that, my whole life, everyone around me was always working very hard. And while sometimes the consequences of that were people often suffered from burnout, they were overwhelmed, they tend to put others before themselves. A lot of the benefits of that is I think I learned my sense of discipline and strong, tenacious work ethic by watching my family members around me. And my papu was in some ways like the peak of that performance, that willingness to be and do whatever it takes to provide for his family. And so I would remember waking up as early as 5 o'clock in the morning to get in this truck with him. And, soon the smells of fried eggs and bagels and hot dogs would waft through the air. And what I noticed in those moments was here was a man who was working so hard, already awake for hours, could easily just be really cranky about all that. But every single customer that ever came to his truck was so excited to see him. And it dawned on me that the reason why they were so excited was because he was so freaking charming. Like he actually didn't allow how hard he was working to impact how he was connecting with other people. If anything, you'd have no idea how hard his job was because of what a smooth talker he was and how great he was at helping people feel good about themselves during something as simple as picking up a hot dog and having a lunch break.
That's awesome. Do you think, as you're explaining that story and coming back to your original comment about family, in an extended Greek family context, many adults help take care of the children? True?
Mm-hmm.
Not true?
Absolutely true.
So you get used to being with a variety of adults who are trustworthy and have different interesting things that they do with their lives, and you just join in, right?
Yes.
So I'm thinking you probably picked up a whole lot of business skills too from just being there.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever really thought about it that way, but you're probably right. Yeah, even something as simple as watching a man sell hot dogs taught me a lot.
Well, yeah, because it's customer service. It's about putting your best foot forward. It's about bringing joy to people's lives as part of the business. And it's about all the stuff that goes into creating that experience for the customer that they know nothing about, but that you have to work so hard to create. I was just thinking of you, I don't know how old you were, 3 or something, in there in the truck and helping out with things. And you also probably learned to help, to do what was necessary when it was required and to anticipate things coming up. I'm just rattling off some things, but am I on the right track or no?
I think you're really onto something there because I absolutely believe that what we see is what we internalize as children. It's our most formative, malleable time for us. And in watching my papu and even watching some of the other adults in my life, which maybe I'll go into a little bit after this, the thing that always dawned on me that I always picked up from them is that people are worthy of respect. The way that you interact with people is in a respectful manner. And it doesn't mean it can't be funny or silly or quirky, but you always want to treat people with a sense of reverence. And when I think about the elements of creating a business, to your point, Marie, at the end of the day, you can't have a sustainable business if your customers don't feel respected by you, because they'll just go to whoever else is doing what you're doing.
Exactly. Respect is really the foundation. If you don't respect another person, everything else falls apart because there's no trust.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm imagining that was when you were younger, the hot dog truck.
Mm-hmm.
So what about when you got older? Another incident maybe from when you were a teenager or an older child or a young adult that stands out for you?
Yeah, so one thing in particular that really stands out for me and moves a little bit outside of my family, but is definitely a figure in my life who came to feel like family was when I started taking piano lessons at around 14 years old. And in particular, I don't know if you're familiar at all with the Disney movie Snow White, but
Yeah.
I always used to joke that my piano teacher, Irene, was like the embodiment of Snow White. Like she had this beautiful studio that had trees all around it. You know, she had all these cats that would come and sit on the bench with you. She would feed the birds while you were playing. Like she was just the epitome of this graceful, wondrous, loving, princess-like figure. And part of what I remember so clearly about her is by 14 years old, as I had mentioned previously, you know, watching my family and how hard they worked, it instilled a lot of hardworking qualities in myself. And one of the repercussions of that in a way, or one of the modes of self-talk that I generated for myself was like the need to constantly look for what was wrong or what wasn't good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And part of how Irene, my piano teacher, really impacted my life was she just had this gift, even though it was her role to teach me how to play the piano and improve. She just had this gift of always starting by celebrating what I was great at and really getting excited to acknowledge what were the parts of a piece that I had picked up on, or, you know, what was my musicality that was wonderful and worth celebrating. Like she never started with oh, well, you missed these 6 notes and this was offbeat and this was out of, like, it was never coming from a hugely critical place of here's what's not working, which was kind of my own mode of thinking at that age.
Mm-hmm. To have somebody like that in your life when you're young can make a big difference in your own self-talk.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also had lots of experiences with piano teachers because I grew up learning to play the piano. And I had one piano teacher in particular that I just idolized. And she wasn't Snow White, but she was kind of a badass, you know. She would get to her apartment by crawling up the balconies, you know, and she rode a motorcycle. And she was the opposite of all the sort of follow the rules people that were around me. And I really I really liked that she was a piano teacher and that she was, you know, such a badass. It was really great. And she stood out in my formation too, that, you know, sometimes you need to just go do what you have to do. And if other people don't like it, it's important to be who you are. And nobody else in my life was saying that. It's interesting. The role of music teachers, and I would also say sports coaches in people's lives, is really significant. And when you look at resiliency studies, the kids that were able to survive the most horrific odds had a coach or a music teacher somehow who was there, or a club leader who was just like that person for them, who helped them see themselves in this positive light.
First of all, like even just thinking about that really moves me because, you know, it brings me back to some of the things that were going on in my life when I started playing the piano, but it also makes complete sense to me that these are the figures that support children, teenagers, young adults get to feel that sense of possibility or hope. Because what I notice is, you know, whether it's in the arts, like learning how to play an instrument or learning how to sing, or in athletics, like having a sports coach, what I find that all of those modalities have in common is that they are just means of people learning how to express what is meaningful to them. Mm-hmm. And express themselves. And so why I'm so grateful for those more artistic teachers and coaches that I've had in my own life is, while everyone else was kind of in the narrative of like, you know, go to school, follow the rules, notice society, consume media, do what's supposed to be done, all of these folks, all their role required of them was to ask me like, oh, well, who do you want to be? How do you want to do this? How do you want to express this part of yourself and enjoy it along the way?
Mm-hmm. The role of joy as you're growing up. Nobody talks about it much. My husband showed me the other day an article that was written about the role of pleasure in the way that French parents raise their children, and never thought of it that way before. But the French culture, although it's really hierarchical, there's this whole role of pleasure, and they teach children which of these foods gives you the most pleasure when you eat it. Describe what it's like on your tongue. It's a really interesting thing that I'd say is missing from most North American ways of raising children, where it's just work and do what you have to do and fix that mistake, or then just do whatever and, you'll grow up on your own, which is another not such a good idea. But this idea of the education of the palate and the education of for beauty and for taste never occurred to me before. And when I think about it now, just talking to you, that's the role of what our piano teachers did for us. It was part of educating that love, that joy, that the pleasure of music, right?
Absolutely.
So what happens is you have a temperament when you're born. You face these obstacles and you have these opportunities and you develop personality on top of your temperament. So what would you say is like your temperament? And what would you say you've added on as you got older that became part of your personality?
Great questions. So there's so many great stories of me as like a young little girl insisting that I was a fairy, like completely insisting that I was this otherworldly magical creature that was here and could talk to the trees and the flowers and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I mention that because I think the temperament that I was truly born into and born with was one of pure whimsy and joy and playfulness and just a curious imagination, like just wanting to go out there and treat everything like a magic trick or treat everything like a fairy tale and just like be with all of it.
It's lovely. I don't think anyone has ever said that in a podcast interview so far. I'm just really identifying with that too, because I used to want to fly when I was growing up. And I spent so much time jumping off of things and hurting myself and really creating wings out of everything because I was sure I was some kind of a flying being. I just somehow the wings were missing.
Like I said, I really connect with that. I definitely came out of the womb deciding that like, wait a minute, something's missing, patting on. What the heck?
And then you added on, though, because you can be magical and you are magical. And then you had to add on a few other pieces, too. So what did you add on?
Absolutely. I would say definitely, again, hinting at some of the stories that I shared, the first thing that I started to add on was a sense of discipline, like a sense of how to be hardworking, how to be focused, how to be clear on what my goals are, how to be diligent and tenacious in my studies. And a core value that was instilled in my family was like, hey, we've all had to work with our hands and work really hard, and we want you to work with your brain. Like we've brought you this life so that you can work with your brain and hopefully work less hard as a result. So there was also the sense of like learning how to use my wit or my intelligence so as to accomplish things, if I were going to put it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So you would have added that on for sure. And they probably had wit and intelligence too, but they just didn't have a chance to develop it. And they were hoping you would realize that dream. So then what did you do?
It's interesting because really what I did, if I look back on it, is I focused more on the things I took on and less of what I was born with. And what I mean by that is, especially with the upbringing of my mother looking over my studies, what became very important was, of course, you can be artistic, you can enjoy writing, you can enjoy singing, you can enjoy the piano, but remember that those are hobbies. And what we want you to focus on is like, what's going to be the thing that like moves you forward and has you be successful. So what I noticed was, the fairy tale magic girl became the secret in the closet, so to speak. She became the character that I got to play with now and again and explore. But really what I embodied and what I did was became a very hardworking, overachieving, high-performing, student into university student into ultimately a hardworking young adult. That's where I created most of my life from.
So as you get older and that you also encounter other groups, going to university would have been a type of culture that you went into, any places that you've worked, any experiences that you've had with culture, with business, with the workplace culture is what I meant earlier. And other ethnic groups, you may have learned another language, or you may have changed your religion or adopted one or dropped it, any of the above. So what groups have you grown into and brought into the way you do things now?
So many, but the first one that stuck out to me, possibly because you were reading out my bio earlier, is I had mentioned at the end of it that you can catch me, if I'm not talking about coaching, you could catch me setting a couple of witchy intentions, so to speak. And so for me, I was raised into a Greek Orthodox family, Greek Orthodox Christian. And while it was so much a part of my routine growing up, it never really quite felt like mine, which I think is familiar for people who are like raised in a predominant religion, but don't really have a conversation of like, well, this is why we worship in this place. And this is why we go to this place of worship to do so. And like, this is why it's meaningful to us. And so for me, as this young adult who was now outside of my home, living on the campus of my university, starting to dabble in expressing all these new facets of myself, something that I began to take on, partially because there were students around me who were more familiar with it than I was, were more, you could call it witchy, you could call it Wiccan, you could call it, new age spiritual, whatever you want to call it. It was just like tapping into a belief system around spirit that felt way more true to myself. And it also reminded me of the sparkly fairy magic girl that wanted to fly. Mm-hmm. So I'm recording this episode right now inside of my home office. And if you could take a camera and do a whole loop around, what you would actually see around me are plants, chimes, singing bowls, crystals. I have a card that I pulled this morning for myself. There's just a deep-rooted, grounded sense of who I am inside of how I commune with spirit in a lot of ways. And the modalities that I use are, quirky, and they're not super organized per se, but they bring me a lot of peace and a lot of comfort.
And it would need to stay quirky and not super organized, because that way you can be intuitive and respond to the moment, right?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And express that fairy magical side of you.
Yeah.
So that's something that you have moved into. So this is still talking about individual practices that you would be doing, although you may not feel that they are practices in that sense. But what about a community? Is there a Wiccan community that you feel you belong to, or no? Or is there some other community where you feel you belong?
Yes, absolutely. So as I mentioned, while I was going through this journey for myself, I had the opportunity to just meet other students at my university that were versed in it. And, nowadays in the town that I currently live in, I actually am a part of a group of women that all have similar shared practices and appreciation. So one reason why I'm super grateful to be a part of this women's group is oftentimes what I find is that there still exists a lot of groups that are run hierarchically, where people are still being told what to do or how to think or what to believe in, and it's not very connected. And what I love about this group is it helps me stay present to a style of leadership that I believe is what the world needs right now, which is one that is very much far more compassionate, more in flow, more willing to dance in the moment and be with what's actually there, and always willing to invite in other people's takes, perspectives, intuitions, contributions, all the above.
Mm-hmm. So this is a business women's group that you belong to?
Yes.
And that kind of leads me into another question. Tell me a little bit about your business journey, because it's also interesting. I think a lot of people would relate to what you explained to me earlier.
Oh, goodness. My business journey is a fun one. To give the summary of it, how I ended up here was I spent 4 years on a campus that was very empowering for me. It taught me that my voice mattered. And I then hit the streets of New York looking for a career, and suddenly those cheerleaders rooting me on, caring so much about my voice, regardless of my age or my gender or my ethnicity or any of it, disappeared. And I was heartbroken by this. And so I went on a search for who will be the person who will be my cheerleader, who will raise me up, who can mentor me, who sees that I have something to offer and wants me to express my voice. And I thought I had succeeded in finding this person when I was offered a position at a startup in New York that was similarly run by a Greek American woman. And I was like, this is perfect. I see so much of myself in her. She's older than I am. She's walked the walk. We come from the same place. She's going to be the person to support me. But as it had turned out, she had come from corporate America, which had instilled a very particular culture of there only being room for one woman at the boys' table, so to speak. And so rather than having this very nourishing, uplifting partnership that I thought I had signed up for, I faced ridicule, being put down, being told my ideas were stupid, and then turning around and seeing them being used anyway. It was a heartbreaking experience. I felt devastated by it. And while I felt devastated, I'm also so grateful for it because this was the moment where I realized, like, oh, no one's going to hand me a golden ticket to go out there and be a leader and have an impact and change things for people. I have to just go and do it. And so I started doing that by producing women's empowerment events, bringing people together, creating panels. One of the panels that I produced, I met the coach. I was so fascinated by the work that she did that it inspired me to take on my own training program. And now 4.5 years later, I've been running this business.
It's interesting how the things that feel the most painful can sometimes, in hindsight, be the most instructive.
Yes, absolutely.
And you think, this is something I really needed to detach from other people's expectations of me, maybe, to be able to use my own voice, irrespective of what other people think, whether they're cheering me on or not, to move forward with the things that I know are going to help people because I know it's going to help people, rather than waiting for someone to approve it.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's interesting because I accepted that position because I was like, oh, this is going to be the woman that helps me figure out how I want to go make a difference on the planet. And in some ways I was right. It just occurred very differently from how I first thought so when I said yes.
Mm-hmm. Interesting, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So that brings me to my next question, which may be related. A time when you felt your understandings of the world were actually your culture, and it's not what other people believed, or that there was another norm somewhere that you just went, wait a minute, I am a result of a cultural group and underpinnings and a lens, and it's not the same as everybody else's.
Mm. Yeah. Oh my goodness. There have been so many. I think in some ways, and it isn't even a single instance, it's been a variety of instances. Because I've mentioned over and over again now, like I have been raised as a Greek American within America. And what I noticed to be true about American culture is that it so greatly praises the individual. It's so much about the individual. It's so much about individual success, individual opinions, individual rights, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
It's all about me, me, me.
All about me, 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 me. And so time and time again, there have been so many intersections in my life where I've been like, well, what about everyone? It's almost like cold water dumped on you when you realize like, oh, like not everyone thought to think of everyone or not everyone considered the impact on everyone. And not to make this too current or too sensitive, but I think one of the places I've seen this the most is the United States response or lack thereof to the COVID-19 pandemic that has happened over the course of this year.
Mm-hmm.
And waking up over and over again thinking like, wow, we could be so much further along in this if there wasn't such a selfish response there. But that's inconvenient for me. Time and time again shows me like it's actually a cultural value, being a Greek cultural value, perhaps a European cultural value, to value the community as something equally as important as the individual.
That you are a part of, that you're standing on the shoulders of, that other people will stand on your shoulders as a result of.
Yes, absolutely.
There's a whole lot of relationality that generally is missing in North America. This idea that I can do anything I want. Everything we do has a ripple effect on everything from the blade of grass around us to our future great-great-grandchildren. And until we recognize that, we're just going to be stuck in this little bubble of individuality. And individuality never even existed outside of any culture until maybe 100 years ago here.
Yeah.
Yet we consider it normal, but should it be? I think your Greek background has definitely given you some useful tools to help you balance the collectivist and the individualist perspectives, because they're both necessary. They just need to be balanced.
Yeah, I agree with you. Not to make it too Greek again, but,
Make it Greek. I'm all about making it Greek.
Yeah, as the Greeks say, like ban metronariston, which is everything in moderation. The collective is valuable, the individual is valuable, but you need to actually stand on the scale and balance the value of them both. Once you have one more than the other, you're going to lose something.
Yeah, because you still need to be the fairy princess and at the same time a member of a large extended Greek family. Run your business so that it feels like it's family and people feel like they're joining a family, and yet they learn to speak their own truth, right? that moderation is there for sure.
Yeah, I love the way that you brought all that in together, that it felt like a summary of me that really resonates.
I'm glad it does.
You nailed me. You got it.
So if people are going to hire you as a coach or join one of your programs, what would you say to them about what's the best way to work with you?
Before what I would assert what the best way to work with me is, I'd get curious on what it is they want to work with me for.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the first job of a coach is to not assume that you know what your clients need, like to actually put that question on them. Because what I would say is, if you're an individual who is craving community, like is actually craving going through an experience where you are growing and developing and learning from others, then I'd be like, great, absolutely. I offer group programs. Let's, show up here. This one's on leadership. This one's on your well-being, like which is the one that resonates with you the most. So what I find is very rarely are people unfamiliar with personal development work when they find me. It's not to say that that means they've already worked with coaches before, but there's been like that itch of like, oh, I know like there's like stuff that I want to work on and sort out, and I'm like ready to take it to the next level. I've read the self-help books, I've done the personality assessments and quizzes, and now I'm ready for something a little stronger and more personal. And when you're in that camp, I would say, the two of us getting to work together privately one-on-one is absolutely the thing for you. And I can assert that really confidently because what I love about my process is that it's not just this facilitative, oh, you said you want to get promoted in 6 months. Okay, we're going to talk about the action plan for you to get there in 6 months, and that's going to be that, and this is what it's going to cost and whatever. When you bring to me that goal, we spend the next 6 months also transforming your own thoughts, self-talk, beliefs, that has you questioning, concerned about, or wondering what it would take to get you promoted. We get to address that you need to get promoted to validate that you matter. We address the feeling like you can't be promoted because your voice is too small. We address the, fear that being promoted means that, things are going to happen in your romantic relationship with your partner. So it actually becomes this, I know I'm nerding out over it, but if you can't tell, it's because I'm super passionate about what I do. It just becomes this fully fledged transformative experience of getting you to what you want, but also having you transform along the way.
Because we can identify specific things we would like to have moving in our lives, but it's all part of an ecosystem. And you don't just jump in there and say, okay, promotion, let's put in the promotion tree there. Like you have to grow it. You have to grow that tree.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. That was an interesting and insightful answer. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
I think just that what I'm super appreciative of, even in this conversation with you, Marie, is, I've been a coach for 4.5 years. I like to think that I know how I tick. And I'm super grateful for the way that you brought in summary the value of balancing being a fully expressed individual that can own their voice and still doing so in a way that is thoughtful to and in service of their community. Like I know that to be true in my heart, and to hear you say it was really profound for me. And I just want to thank you for that.
Oh, and the way you said it is way better than the way I said it. So.
Roll the tapes. Go back.
We'll just turn that into a tweet. So any things you want to promote, programs, courses, services?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. So as I mentioned, I do run both group programs and individual coaching all year long. If you're interested in my current offerings, you can find out more at www.hearherroar.net. That's www.hearherroar.net. All those services are listed there. I'm launching a group program that's starting in November. And other than that, if you're just interested in leadership, the world of coaching, witchy intentions, beer brewing, I have a contact form on that website. Feel free to reach out, and I'd love to talk to you.
Awesome. Just for people who are listening, if you want to know about the roar part on the website, it is spelled R-O-A-R. So hear her roar as in roar. In case you're wondering what that word is, because it doesn't always come out clear when we're doing the audio. So there you go. You're also on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram, so it should be pretty easy to find you.
Yes.
Well, Christina, thank you so much for this very interesting talk, and I wish you many opportunities to use your fairy wings.
Thank you so much. Same to you. Looking forward to flying together someday.
Christina Stathopoulos was born into a large extended Greek family and grew up interacting regularly with all her relatives. She learned hard work and business acumen from her uncle's hot dog truck business and the magic of the arts from her piano teacher. As an adult seeking the Greek family experience and longing for solidarity and support, Christina sought employment with a Greek-American woman in a business experience that did not go well. She learned from this to create her own extended support network, using her voice to inspire and guide other women in their business journeys. I hope you enjoyed this interview and that Culture and Leadership Connections will continue to guide and inspire your day. Thank you for listening. This podcast would not be possible without the expertise of our Culture and Leadership Connections production team. A big thank you and shout out to Mike Kurlander for audio production and editing, to Malvika Kathpal for the show notes, Bernadette Guadiz for online web and social media management and promotions, Celine Bayogo for design, and Kirsten Hoyer for website and branding. Thank you so much. Hey, Culture and Leadership Connections podcast listeners. Do you love these insightful and moving interviews published twice monthly for your listening pleasure? You may not know that it costs between $300 and $500 per month to pay for our podcast episodes. Shocking, but true. Well, now you can help support this podcast by showing your love with a little skin in the game real money on the Patreon website. For as little as $5 or as much as $50 a month, you can contribute to keep Culture and Leadership Connections alive and healthy. Your donation is invaluable in helping us connect the hearts and minds of people across cultures and professions for happier and more humane workplaces. I know you will call on your inner generosity, knowing that your contribution is a practical demonstration of love and support. Check out the patreon.com/culture and leadership connections page to see what subscription level feels right for you and find out about the special loyalty perks at each patron level. That's spelled Patreon, patreon.com/culture and leadership connections. Thank you for your generosity.